put this down, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. When I was thinking about doing this talk, I was thinking that at first I felt a little bit like an imposter because I'm not a veteran. But then I thought, well, I think anybody that's lived into their 80s is already a veteran. And I think also the people in my age group that lived through World War II, they were born between the wars. And we've got to remember there were only 20 years between the end of the First World War and the beginning of the Second. And I remember as a child, we were sort of raised on World War I, and it was the Great War, and it was the war to end war. And we really believed that. My father and most of the girls, kids I knew, fathers, all had fought in the First World War. And we didn't keep Memorial Day, we kept Armistice Day. And as in this country, nearly every little community had its own war memorial. It was like an obelisk standing there with the names of all the young men who had died in that war. And on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, November the 11th, at 11 o'clock in the morning, we had the 2-minute silence. I'm sure English people who are here today remember that quite vividly. And everything stopped. Everything stopped. The buses, the trains, people in business would stop and they would stand. In school, the teacher would be quiet and we'd all stand up, and we would try for 2 minutes to remember. And I used to go with my mother and my sister to this local war memorial, and we used to take part in the service there, and it was singing, and it was hymns, you know, and there was the British Legion, which is, you know, the British equivalent of the American Legion. They had band, and they used to play, and then there was a parson in white surplice, and he had white hair, and it was windy. And at the 2-minute silence, these guns would go off, and we would keep silent. And nothing would be moving, and no sound, just this white hair and this white surplice blowing. And I remember being particularly struck. There were a lot of women standing around wearing black, because in those days, between the wars, women, widows, still wore black. And then the guns would go off again, and they'd break the silence and sing a hymn. But they always, at the end, read this poem. I'm just going to read this last bit of it. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. And we really were grateful that they had given their lives so that never again would there be war and killing. Well, of course, that's not quite true. In fact, not at all true. And the first thing I remember was my sister Betty was 3 years older than me, and she got in trouble with our father because she brought home the translation copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. And my father said he wouldn't have it in the house. He said, I don't want you reading that muck. So she said, well, if you've never read it, how do you know enough about it to condemn it? They had a big argument. And he finally said, this is out of my book, by the way, "That's enough from you, miss. The man's a dangerous lunatic. You mark my words, we'll have trouble with him before we're through." Not generally an astute political observer, he was dead right about that. It was 1937 and horrible things were taking place. Hitler had taken over the Rhineland and was about to seize Austria. Even though we were not involved, others were having plenty of trouble. Now, Betty and I went to boarding school at this school just a bit north of London in Hertfordshire. And it was an all-girls school. It was kind of, well, it was kind of monastic, let's just say. And we didn't see men much at all. But we used to get, once a month, we used to get this gentleman, Commander Sutton of the Royal Navy, retired, and he used to come once a month and give a lecture on current events. And he was always called, not to himself, not to his face, but he was always called Commander Mutton, because we thought he was quite boring. So sure enough, in October 1938, it was time for Commander Mutton to come along. And it was not boring. It was fraught with drama. I'm going to speak to you this evening about the Munich Agreement, he announced, his voice dripping disgust. Peace in our time. We have reached a low point indeed in our country's history. We shall not have long to live before we bitterly regret the pusillanimous actions of Mr. Chamberlain. To go off to Munich and come home waving a piece of paper, the betrayal of our friends in Czechoslovakia, and to imagine that the liar will abide by any agreement. And then he went on like this. Everybody was absolutely shocked. But of course, he was quite right. Earlier that fall, when we'd first gone back to school in September, we were all being fitted out with gas masks. I mean, this was serious stuff. And people from the government came, let me see, to fit everybody out. And we all had to go up in turn, and my friend Farney and I were sent to our house common room to be fitted. And we went up there to the top floor, and this was where the house, quote unquote, was. And it was weird. It was really weird to be put into one of these things. But for Farney, it was dreadful. Poor Farney had been shortchanged in the article of chins. Her face simply sloped back from the tip of her nose, and they couldn't seem to get a gas mask that would stay anchored under her non-existent chin. And it was a hot day. The gas masks came in small, medium, and large, and I was soon settled with a medium. Fanny tried on and tried on. Well, the poor lady from the government, she just said, well, dear, you'll have to hold it in place with your hand. So I said, Fanny, stick your lower jaw out like a bulldog, and that seemed to work. Now, I've got to tell you, you might think that it's pretty grim being fitted out with gas masks. They were grey rubber which fitted around the cheeks and was held in place by straps around the back and over the top of the head. There was a clear plastic window to see through and a metal snout with the actual gas filter. The air came in through this, but it went out at the sides of the mask over your cheeks. And the sound was, I can only describe it as a very gentle fart. And we used to have to, they started having us wear them for like half an hour at a time in class. And the teacher had to wear one too. And we all got to giggling and then laughing aloud, except the laughter was muffled and the plastic window got all fogged up. And by unanimous decision, the 20 minutes was shortened to 10, and not much learning went on. And so no wonder we were glad when Mr. Chamberlain came back from Munich and announced that we'd got peace in our time and the gas masks could be stowed away in the closet upstairs. Well, then of course came next summer, and we were off on a wonderful cruise to the Mediterranean, and coming back, it was very clear that things were not good at all. And we used to listen, everybody on the ship would gather and listen to the BBC News at 6 p.m. and we listened to these accounts of all these children being sent away, and we just all like sent away like parcels into the countryside. And it was really tragic. I mean, these were very sad times. And we were afraid we weren't going to get back in time. Well, we did. And in fact, we were greeted by a letter from my father's boss saying, there is absolutely not going to be a war. Well, of course, he was wrong there. So we were busy sewing blackout curtains. And this, miles and miles and miles of this blackout material. And we, ran the sewing machine and sewed the curtains. And it smelled kind of sour. I can still remember that sour smell of blackout dye. Well, Hitler invaded Poland on the 1st of September. The Luftwaffe were bombing Warsaw. The British Army, Navy and Air Force were on full alert and mobilizing, and His Majesty's government sent an ultimatum to Hitler, then a final ultimatum. Either the Germans would cease bombing Warsaw, withdraw their troops from Poland, and send a message of compliance by 11 a.m. on Sunday, September the 3rd, or a state of war would exist between Great Britain and Germany. France also sent the same ultimatum. So Mummy and Betty and I went to church, and we were on the south coast at this boarding house, which was kept by some friends of ours. And it was morning prayer, it was not the Mass or anything. And it went along just about as usual. It's a very beautiful old building. It's been worshipped in for about 1,000 years. And it just felt, soothing and comfortable, except that then at 11 o'clock, the vicar brought out this portable radio, and he put it on a little table at the top of the main aisle, and he turned it on. And it was the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain. And he'd already begun speaking. I have to tell you now that no such message has been received, and that therefore we are at war with Germany. It is the evil things we shall be fighting against. His voice sounded tired, drained, almost defeated already. When he'd ended, came the strains of God Save the King, and everybody stood. Women were weeping quietly, others looked stunned. I looked at Mummy and saw tears rolling down her cheeks, at Betty, very red and wiping her eyes. My face felt stiff, even cold. Then the rector switched off the radio. Let us pray, he said, and there was a corporate heave and clatter as people got down on their knees to begin the first among the billions of such prayers for peace, for victory, to be offered on all sides in the years to come. We came out into the lovely hot sunshine and drove back in silence to the boarding house. And of course now we were really actively helping put the blackout curtains, and this was for real now. And the old gentleman who lived at this place and favoured a quite smelly pipe, and he stumped around the house in carpet slippers, saying, I give it 6 years. Last time it took us 4 years. This time it'll be 6. Daddy rang up from home, and he said it'll be over by Christmas, Betty mildly contradicted. Nope, hardly get going by Christmas. 6 years, you mark my words. Well, of course, he was quite right. I'm trying to keep track of the time. I don't want to talk too long, and I'm not getting on very fast. The winter, I've just got to share one thing about the Christmas that year. The news had been very, very bad, and first of all, the aircraft carrier Hood had been torpedoed in Scapa Flow by a U-boat and sunk, with over 1,000 lives lost. So it was the King's speech, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Day. And he began, as always, "My dear people." But it was the ending that remained with us. He read a poem, his painful speech impediment less marked than usual. "I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, 'Give me a light, that I may tread safely into the unknown.' And he said to me, 'Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way.'" I want to say one quick thing. Between the time the war broke out and Christmas came, a big change happened in people's attitude. In the beginning of the war, people went around saying, "It's not the German people we're fighting against, it's Hitler and his gang." And I'm here to tell you, my friends, by Christmas, the only good Germans are dead German. And that's, you know, they say truth is the first casualty in war. Well, I think objectivity is pretty much right after it. Well, we went back to boarding school. It was a school with about 300 girls, and the dining hall was about 1.5 times the size, maybe twice the size of this room. And it had big, this kind of cathedral roof with skylights in it. And even, it was so big that birds used to fly in and out. But they had, of course, put blackout paint all over these skylights, and they had also framed in the glass with small chicken wire stuff to catch glass in case it, you know, broke. Okay, now, I'm trying to, I don't think I can possibly do a whole connected thing. We'd be here all night. But I will tell you, this happened 1940. The whole school was at supper, and the dining hall was filled with chatter and the savory aroma of what we charmingly called bean slop. It was lima beans cooked up with a few shreds of onions and tomatoes. I mean, I'm sure it was an English cook who once said, "Hunger is the best sauce." Well, it was the only sauce, but that's all right. We just finished the bean slop, and now they were bringing out the rice pudding. And we were sitting all at the table. There's 14 girls at a table, 6 aside and 1 at each end. And I was at one end, and the prefect, the senior girl, was here. And we were sitting there, and the pudding was served out. And one girl said, "You know, I never seem to not be hungry." When suddenly there was a distant crump, and the floor shook slightly. And for a moment, conversation quieted. Then it resumed full volume. We were used to stray bombs not so very far away. Then came a much louder explosion that heaved the floor and the chairs we were sitting in. Shake, shake, rumble, rumble. This time everybody stopped talking. But nothing more happened. We picked up our spoons, and Elizabeth said, "Potter's Bar, I bet," and Pod Hewlett across the table, "Brookman's Park, more like, by the power station." Then, beyond noise and shaking, blast. The whole building rocked and shook so much that no coherent thought could form. Elizabeth had shoved her chair back, and ducked her head under the table. I stared at her stupidly. Then I saw the plate and rice pudding, still on the table in front of me, only now sticking out of it were all these sharp-pointed shards of broken black-painted glass from the skylight overhead. It seemed to take a long, long time to work out that a bomb had fallen right outside. Miss Essay, the headmistress, pinged the bell for silence. "Everybody into the cellar immediately," she called. Table by table, according to custom, we filed out, down the hall and down the stairs to the cellars below, already fitted up with cots and blankets. There were white faces, but no panic. Discipline pays off. Our table at the far end from the door was among the last to leave, not without one regretful glance at my glass-studded rice pudding. Downstairs we sat in rows along the edges of the cots against the wall. Across the way, Podge Hewlett stared at me, her eyes wide. "Elaine, what's all that in your hair?" I put my hand up and Fanny grabbed me. "Wait, don't touch it," she shouted. "What?" "It's full of glass," she went on. "Nurse." And the nurse came over to, "Come, Elaine, sit here." And she's very businesslike, and she handed me a kidney dish, and she started with a tooth comb picking out bits of glass. And all the girls were standing looking. And I said, "I'm going to tell my grandchildren about this one day." They giggled at the idea of me ever being old enough to have grandchildren or get married at all. So anyway, that went on, and later we were allowed to go back to our houses, and this was like a whole campus, and there was a quad in the middle. It wasn't a quad, it was more of a triangle, but an open space. And in the quad, there were men, home guard, keeping watch, belatedly and rather uselessly, but comforting just the same. "What are they supposed to do, catch the bombs on the way down?" muttered Sylvia. We giggled, but we felt happy that they were there. Now I'm losing mine. I don't want to get lost. Okay, well, we didn't talk about Dunkirk, but you all know about Dunkirk. Dunkirk had already happened by this time. And I think I'm going to jump ahead now and skip over the year I was at college in Bristol and come back to London now, Wimbledon, which is where we lived, which was southwest London, and where I was working at a home. It was the Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen's Families Association, SAFA for short, home for children from birth to year 7 years old, whose fathers were in the service and whose mothers were either in hospital having another baby or a nervous breakdown or an operation or something of that kind. One mother had run away with a Polish soldier. So we looked after these kids, and I haven't talked about rationing. I've got some information about all the food rationing and stuff, but that's not very interesting, but it's all here and you can look at it afterwards. But I was the sort of lowest person on the totem pole, and my job was laundry. And we did it in the basement. It took all morning, every morning. This is just to give you an idea what conditions were like. There were 2 sinks, 2 huge wash boilers, and a mangle. First came the nappies, the diapers. They had been soaked in pails of disinfectant, and we now put them in the wash boiler with soap while it lasted, and soda, and boiled them for 20 minutes. Then, with the help of the day's volunteer, when she showed up, I hoisted them out with a wooden stick and plopped them into the first rinse water, avoiding as far as possible getting splashed with boiling water. After the first rinse, we ran them through the mangle. It's one of these hand crank things. You remember those? Yes, everybody here is old enough to remember those. And then we rinsed them again and wrung them out again and hung them out to dry. Then there was still the next task, a worse one, the small mountain of sheets, wet with urine and frequently soiled as well. We got to work on them. The job was manageable early in the month, with soap still in reasonable supply, but by the third week all the soap ration was used up. Sorry, I've lost the place. No more soap until the 1st of next month. How are you going to make sheets, towels, clothing, wool blankets, clean and sanitary, with nothing but water and soda? I hated and loathed this job. And then I went on night duty, and that, if I thought it was bad before, boy, try night duty. And I'm not going to go into great detail about that, except that this was during a time when the Blitz was really bad, and just about every night, unless it was cloudy weather, the Luftwaffe would come over, usually late, around 10, 11. More often than not would come the air raid warning, the foreboding up and down moan of the sirens going off, usually before midnight. And hurry, hurry, get the children up, get their shoes on, get their coats on, find their gas masks. Day stuff, up, hurry, hurry, bring the babies, bring the toddlers, get them down into the basement. And then sit and wait and endure. There was the boom of anti-aircraft guns. There were explosions that shook the house, the drone of enemy planes, the grinding of bombs falling, and the ground shaking beneath us. Every so often there was the least favorite sound of all, the descending shriek of a bomb. The children were great. They were stoic. Sometimes there would be tears, sometimes a cry of, "Oh, nurse." Once my special friend, 6 years old Ellen, confided, "Mainly I don't mind too much, but when I think of my mum and they get too near, then I cry." Sometimes we would start them singing, "Roll out the barrel," "It's a long way to Tipperary," "I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts," "Maisie Dotes." We got to really hating Hitler, we really did. Now, what else wanted to tell you? The first night of the V1s. The V1s, for me, were the worst. It was really awful. We, a girlfriend of mine and I went to a college dance. She was still in college. She had done her work. I didn't. So anyway, she got me fixed up with a friend of her beau, and we all went to this dance, and it was very nice. But the dances ended early. They ended, I think, about 10 p.m. because underground trains stopped running around 11, and the buses stopped running because of the Blitz. So we came out from the dance into the late dusk, and it was beautiful. A few stars in the opal sky, and we started walking down to the underground. And suddenly, the night erupted in noise and confusion. Anti-aircraft guns began firing, and we saw for the first time what appeared to be a small plane surging along, low, low, seeming barely above the tops of the buildings. We could even see the Iron Cross on its side. The shells burst around it, and shrapnel clattered on the sidewalk, but the thing surged on. We dove down inside the underground, thankful for its safety. "I bet that's the secret weapon they've been talking about," said Derek. "I've been hearing all these rumors about pilotless planes. I bet it's what it is." Whatever it was, it felt good to be safe in the depths of the underground. There were all the people laid neatly in rows along the platform, some already sleeping, oblivious to the passengers passing up and down, the trains roaring in, stopping, and then roaring out. It was safe down there. Soon enough we arrived at Victoria and back up to the surface. Every so often there came the throb of another engine, another plane appeared and the anti-aircraft batteries let loose. We stood stoically waiting for these kids, and they just didn't show up and didn't show up, and we didn't talk about being afraid or anything, we just practiced not minding. And the crowd swirled around and the hands of the clock moved on past 11:30 and so on and so on. To make a long story short, they didn't show up. I didn't then know what had happened to them. So I said, well, we better go. I was going to stay the night at my father's office, which was a little place in a private house. It was an apartment, one of those duplex apartments, and because he'd been kicked out of his regular office by the Air Force, so he was operating in this duplex apartment, and I was allowed to stay there overnight when we were going out late. So he said, Derek, my date, said, come on, let's go. God knows what's happened to them. I'll take you back to your place. I couldn't have left you to walk all that way by yourself anyway, not in this. You see, we had to walk because the trains had stopped by then. So I thought, well, how chivalrous. And then we walked along and we started up Victoria Street, and the infernal din started up again. I found that I had to clench my jaw tightly to keep it from shaking. I had never been more afraid. Death was raining down all around us, not from the pilotless planes, or whatever they were, but from the British guns firing at them. The jagged pieces of shrapnel, 3 inches long or more, clattered around us on the pavement. And any moment one could hit us. As we passed in front of Buckingham Palace by the Victoria Memorial, Derek said, "Here, Elaine, have my tin hat. I'm an air raid warden, that's how I have one." He reached into his backpack as he spoke and pulled it out. "Oh no, you have it. It's yours after all." "No, I want you to have it, Elaine." He said it so earnestly that I didn't argue anymore. I was longing for it anyway. So anyway, that was the first night of the Doodlebugs, and Pat and my friend and her boyfriend, they ended up in spend the whole night sleeping on newspapers in Hyde Park Corner Underground Station, and she was just humiliated. She did not think that was a proper place for a nice young lady to be staying. But these guys, these Doodlebugs, I think there's a few people here who probably remember them. It really was the pits. After the first night, anti-aircraft guns no longer kept on shooting at them. There was a huge system of barrage balloons on the south coast, but they only stopped a few of them, and they just kept coming and coming. It all did seem a bit much on top of all the other things that had happened. It wasn't just all night like the blitzes, but all night and all day. Everybody seemed to have developed a third ear, growing as it might be out of the top of our heads, and this ear was always listening for the sound of approaching buzz bombs. They had an engine that sounded like a turboprop. It throbbed. So I could hear that sound in my sleep. Without waking, I could track its progress, willing the sound to continue, that the bomb might go on its way. Good luck, North London. The thing to watch out for was when the engine suddenly cut out and the sound ceased. Then death was at hand. Usually within 30 seconds, the bomb would land, detonating a ton of high explosives. My sister Betty and Mummy, they slept in a sort of contraption called a Morrison shelter in one of the downstairs rooms. It was something like a giant bird cage, about the size of a big double bed, only the lid of it, the top of the bird cage was flat, and it was very strong metal, and it was supposed to be able to take the weight of a whole house collapsed onto it, and they slept in there. And I only used to go down and jump on top of them if I woke up and this thing had cut out. I'd flee down the stairs, and there was usually time to get in on top of them. But I gave up riding on the top of the bus to work and back. I took an inside seat, fondly hoping that the danger from flying glass might be less there. It wasn't dying I minded so much, it was being crippled or mutilated. Suppose half one's face were torn away. And all the time on the bus, at work, at home, everywhere, people were listening, listening. I felt half angry at the diesel engine of the bus for making such a racket. It interfered with my listening for the next doodlebug, which might have my name on it. Outside the windows of the bus, I saw the people walking in the streets and thought of St. Paul's boast to the Roman tribune. Citizen of no mean city. He was talking about Tarsus. I always think this is my thought, but this is my city. I'm proud to be here. Then, finally, things got better. I'm jumping around terrifically. I don't want to take up too long. Ooh, sorry about that. The Allies were advancing, and they'd taken over the east of the, wait a minute, they'd crossed the Rhine at the end of March and were rolling forward. All too soon, the next horror broke, the death camps. Newspapers and cinema newsreels began to be full of horrifying pictures. Of course, we knew about the concentration camps, had heard about them since before the war, but knowing about is different from seeing. Now, you've all seen these pictures, but this was the first time, this was brand new to us. Piles of shoes, somehow eloquent of the feet that had worn them. Piles of false teeth, jewelry, and worst of all, piles of emaciated bodies. The crematoria had not kept pace with the kill. The word ghastly was almost a cliche at that time, but these films were beyond ghastly, beyond hyperbole, and there were living skeletons, barely covered with skin, so weak they couldn't get up off the rough wooden bunks where they lay, but managing to grin feebly and even wave a little to the camera. I saw such a film in Wimbledon, and afterwards I was walking up the hill thinking as much as I could think at all, they must never throw away these films. This is a reminder of what mankind is capable of. Well, it got better and better, and on May the 7th, we knew that May the 8th was going to be the official surrender, the 8th of May, 1945. And I woke up that morning, and I sat up in bed and looked out the window, and I realized fully, I don't have to be afraid anymore. All the rest of my life, I can go to bed at night and know that I can wake up in the morning. It was like the sudden ending of constant pain, so constant that it's become part of you, hardly noticed, except that there it was. Now, no pain, no need to wonder whether this was your last day on earth. And at breakfast, there was a cartoon in the Daily Mail by Lowe. This artist could sum up everyone's feelings in a drawing as powerfully as Churchill could do in a phrase. The picture was dark. In the center and radiating out to the bottom corners was an evil flight of apocalyptic monsters and horsemen and creatures and things. The horsemen had the faces of Nazi leaders, Goebbels, Goering, Himmler, and the rest. And behind them, the sun was bright. The sky was bright. The sun was beginning to rise. And the caption was, "Night passes, and the evil things depart. And I have a copy of that to show you in a couple of minutes. And Betty and I, we were going to go up to town and we were going to join in the celebrations. My father had told us about the victory celebrations after an Armistice Day after World War I. And so we said, well, why don't you come with us? No, he said, I did that last time. You come home when we're finished and we'll all have champagne. So we went off and we got on the underground. We wanted to get there as quick as we could. And we got off the underground at Green Park. And that was where the gun emplacements had all been, or still were. And we walked along Piccadilly toward Piccadilly Circus. And it was, Betty said, it's like Christmas morning. Everybody you met said, good morning, good morning. And it was, it was just total joy. And we came to, about 2/3 of the way down toward Piccadilly Circus, we came to St. James's Piccadilly. St. James was a church there, I think a Wren church, and it was roofless. It had lost its roof in the bombing. And there was singing coming out of it. So we said, let's go in. And they were singing, now thank we all our God. And we all joined in. And then we went back down to Piccadilly, and we hung around there, and we had something to eat. And then we walked along down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And that's where you go, where you used to go. I don't know what it's like now. Everybody was gathered there, a crowded, huge mob of people, and perched on one of the great long anti-aircraft gun barrels was a young medical student from Barts. How we knew that he was a medical student from Barts, St. Bartholomew's Hospital, I don't know, but we did. And he was conducting community singing, like this. And the tune was, "O Come All Ye Faithful," and the words were very simple. Oh, why are we waiting? Well, the reason we were waiting was we were waiting for the King and Queen to come out and join us in the celebration. And we waited quite a while, and we sang quite a while, and it was just a zoo there, but everybody was so happy, and it was just great. And finally, they did come out. It was the King and Queen, and the now Queen, Princess Elizabeth, in this very buxom khaki uniform. She was part of the ATS, and her sister Margaret. And they all came out on the balcony, and everybody went crazy and cheered, and there's this man standing next to me, and he's yelling, "God bless you, Georgie! God bless you!" And it was just wonderful. I mean, it was not worth living through the war for, but we did live through the war, and that was the point. So when we got home, Daddy solemnly, with great ceremony, opened the Jeroboam of champagne he had long been saving for this day. It had been chilling in the fridge since yesterday. And life being what it is, the Jeroboam was flat. A little moan from the group. "Right," said Daddy, rising to the occasion. "We'll open another bottle in a minute, even if it's an ordinary one. But first, you know what we're going to do to celebrate? We're going to bathe in champagne." And we all proceeded along to the powder room, and he put the stopper in the thing, and he poured the champagne, and we all solemnly washed our hands in champagne. And I think I'm going to end there, but I would like to say that I've got all these things which I put out on the table. I never talked about food rationing. I should have done that. Life was a burden to housewives and mothers. How they did it, I don't know. But I think the worst off people of all were people living alone. The meat ration, 1 pound 3 ounces a week, 4 ounces of bacon. You couldn't get bacon. 3 pints of milk. That's not enough. Oh, I should say one thing about that. One good thing that happened out of the war was that poor people, their children, got better fed than ever before. They learned about good nutrition. Kids under 14, I think, got extra milk on there. Everybody had a ration book. They got extra milk. They also got, for free, orange juice concentrate. And that's something that no poor family ever had before the war. So they did well. So putting out these things. Oh, and the other thing are these constant admonitions to, you know, you had here loose lips sink ships. We had careless talk costs lives. The enemy is listening. And these are all little cartoons that were posters by a wonderful artist called Fugas. This picture of a man in a phone booth, but for heaven's sake, oh, it's a woman, I guess, don't say I told you. And all around the outside of the phone booth are little heads of Hitler and so forth. Put those out. And this is the Lowe's cartoon. I cannot tell you what an impact that had for me. And here's the adult rations here, 1 pound 3 ounces, 4 ounces bacon. And it says that 2 pounds of onion. I didn't know that onions were rationed, but I do know that they were very, very hard to get. So there those all are. And I thank you very much for being so patient and listening so kindly.